On the afternoon of October 8, 2011, thick smoke billowed from a secluded property just outside Córdoba, Spain. A fire had been ignited in a hidden spot, burning hotter than usual. Not long after, a father called emergency services, reporting that his two young children had vanished while playing at a nearby park. Police, family, and neighbors quickly joined the frantic search, hoping for a safe return. But behind this desperate call lay a dark secret, one that would soon shock the entire nation.
José Bretón, born in 1973 in Córdoba, grew up in a middle-class family shaped by traditional values and a strict religious upbringing. After completing his studies, he enlisted in the military, eventually rising to the rank of infantry corporal. He later served as an ambulance driver during the war in Bosnia, an experience that exposed him to intense trauma and ultimately led to his desertion. Upon returning to civilian life, José met Ruth Ortiz, a young veterinary student. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and after 4 years together, they married in 2002. However, from the very beginning, their marriage was fraught with trouble. José made it clear he did not want children, and if they ever had any, Ruth would bear full responsibility. Despite his warnings, Ruth gave birth to a daughter, also named Ruth, followed by a son, José. The arrival of their children marked a turning point in their relationship. While he seemed somewhat tolerant of their daughter, the birth of their son triggered a dark transformation in José. His behavior became increasingly oppressive, particularly toward Ruth. Over time, he isolated her from her loved ones and dominated every aspect of her daily life. Driven by an obsessive need for control and a deep-seated fear of contamination, José's routines grew more bizarre. He refused to use public transportation or bathrooms unless he could sanitize every surface beforehand. At home, he imposed strict order and rigid rules, expecting the children to wash their hands as soon as they returned home and remain silent during meals. José often wore earplugs to block out household noise, reflecting his extreme sensitivity and anxiety. For Ruth, life became unbearable. After years of enduring psychological and emotional abuse, she finally sought help. A psychologist helped her understand that José's behavior was not only abnormal, but unacceptable. This newfound clarity gave Ruth the strength to leave. In September 2011, she informed José that she wanted a divorce. Instead of accepting the separation, José began therapy in an apparent effort to change, even consulting a psychologist for help managing his worsening anxiety. However, his emotional state was fragile. At age 15, he had attempted suicide after a breakup, setting a troubling precedent. As the divorce loomed closer, José grew increasingly unstable, constantly contacting his therapist and being prescribed medication that proved ineffective. Determined to move on, Ruth relocated to Huelva with their 2 children and sought refuge at her mother's home. José returned to Córdoba, and they agreed that he would have custody of the children every other weekend. It was during one of these visits that tragedy struck. On October 8, 2011, José called the police, claiming his children, aged 6 and 2, had vanished while playing in a park. He said they had run off, and he lost sight of them. Authorities responded immediately, launching an extensive search that included officers, emergency units, and even local taxi drivers. Posters with the children's faces were distributed throughout the city. Initially, investigators considered the possibility of abduction, but as hours passed, inconsistencies began to surface. Notably, José didn't file an official report until 9 p.m., a delay that raised suspicions. When questioned at the station, he suggested that someone from Ruth's family might have taken the children, pointing to the couple's ongoing separation as a source of tension. However, at the time of the children's disappearance, Ruth and her relatives were all in Huelva, far removed from the unfolding crisis. Upon hearing the news, Ruth immediately suspected José and traveled back to Córdoba. She organized a vigil with neighbors and family, praying for her children's safe return. As the investigation progressed, authorities began to focus on José's mental state. His history of controlling behavior and emotional instability made him a prime suspect. Detectives noticed that his statements didn't add up. He initially claimed the children had disappeared while walking with him, but later said he had arrived by car and was momentarily distracted by a text message. He also claimed that earlier that day his children had been with his sister before he took them to his rural property on the outskirts of Córdoba, arriving there around 1:15 p.m. While the children supposedly slept in the car, he said he lit a bonfire to destroy belongings that had once belonged to Ruth, an attempt to erase painful memories of their broken marriage. Later, around 5 p.m., he claimed he headed to the park to meet his brother and nephews, insisting the children had been sleeping in the vehicle since early afternoon. These claims immediately raised red flags. Detectives sensed he was hiding something and decided to inspect the property that very night. José accompanied a team of investigators to his house, where they discovered the bonfire he had mentioned still smoldering, with embers glowing faintly. It was a disturbing sight. The police also searched his car and found suspicious items: a pair of sharp kitchen utensils and a roll of duct tape. José claimed these were leftovers from moving out of the family home, but his distant, emotionless demeanor left investigators unconvinced. The following morning, as concern for the missing children intensified, detectives interrogated José again. This time, they requested security footage from cameras along the roads between his house and the park. While José's car appeared in the videos, the children did not. Witnesses at the park also confirmed they had seen José alone that afternoon. With suspicions mounting, investigators returned to José's house for a more thorough examination of the bonfire. The fire was now extinguished, and beneath the charred remains they discovered a rectangular structure and an overturned iron table, both used to intensify the heat of the flames. In the ashes they found small bone fragments. The possibility that these were human remains sent shockwaves through the team. But José downplayed the discovery, claiming he had only burned Ruth's personal belongings, books, clothing, and even preserved animals from her veterinary studies. Despite his explanation, investigators informed Ruth of the disturbing find and told her a forensic anthropologist would be brought in to examine the material. The experts studied the remains after they had been collected by police and concluded that the bones did not appear to be human. Instead, they belonged to various animals, mostly rodents and small carnivores. Still, authorities didn't rule José out. His behavior remained suspicious, and he showed none of the distress expected from a father whose children had vanished. Attention focused squarely on the bonfire. Forensic analysis revealed that it had been fueled with gasoline and roughly 600 pounds of firewood. Neighbors later reported seeing the fire burning as early as 3 p.m., and described the smoke as thick and foul-smelling, visible from several miles away. These details contradicted José's story and strengthened the theory that something horrific had occurred during the time he claimed the children were asleep. Investigators began to suspect that the children's bodies may have been destroyed in the fire. They dug beneath the bonfire, hoping to find conclusive evidence, but came up empty. Unfortunately, the excavation destroyed much of the original fire site, eliminating potential forensic clues. Pressure mounted. José was urged to confess, but he continued to deny any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Ruth and her family, along with members of the local community, kept searching, clinging to hope. The children's faces appeared across Spanish news outlets, turning the case into a national headline. On October 12, 2011, José Bretón was arrested and charged with the unlawful detention of his children and fabricating a crime. Although the initial searches of the property yielded no conclusive results, investigators were certain that something more lay hidden. Convinced that José's house held the key to the truth, they brought in a ground-penetrating radar expert and divided the land into sections, determined to scan every inch for buried evidence. The search for answers had become relentless. After 3 weeks without any breakthrough, a judge ordered José to remain in pretrial detention. Search teams expanded their efforts, deploying tracking dogs in hopes of uncovering buried remains. But again, nothing turned up. Authorities explored every lead, inspecting quarries, wells, lakes, and rivers using specialized divers and helicopters. Despite these exhaustive efforts, no solid evidence emerged. Desperate for answers, investigators reviewed José's mobile phone activity and examined additional locations where the children's bodies could have been hidden. Still, the search came up empty. By the end of 2011, the year closed without a single clue to suggest what had truly happened to the children. In early 2012, the authorities officially suspended the searches, convinced the children had never reached the park, contrary to José's claims. The case took another troubling turn when José attempted to take his own life in his prison cell. Though the injuries were minor, he was transferred to the prison infirmary.
Public opinion remained divided. While many viewed José with suspicion, some members of his family continued to defend him publicly, insisting he would never harm his children. They clung to the belief that the children were alive and possibly hidden somewhere by someone close to them. This hope was fueled by scattered reports of alleged sightings, even from abroad. Theories involving potential accomplices began to surface, adding another layer of complexity to the case. 6 months after the children vanished, the court lifted the secrecy order on the investigation, allowing previously undisclosed testimonies to emerge. Witnesses described José as jealous and vengeful, details that cast new light on his character and added weight to the suspicions against him. Still, he maintained his innocence and repeated his version of events. The children had disappeared from the park. In August 2012, Ruth's family formally requested a second forensic analysis of the bone fragments found in the bonfire. These remains had originally been dismissed as non-human, but the new examination, led by another forensic anthropologist, yielded a shocking result. The bones were, in fact, human and belonged to 2 children between the ages of 2 and 6. This contradicted the earlier assessment and exposed a serious error that had delayed the truth for nearly a year. The revelation triggered an uproar. To eliminate any lingering doubts, a third analysis was commissioned, this time conducted by a team of forensic experts from a respected university in Madrid. Their findings confirmed the previous conclusion. The remains were unmistakably human and matched the profiles of 2 small children. Despite the defense's attempts to question the chain of custody and imply possible evidence tampering, authorities stood by the legitimacy of the forensic analyses. The bones had been processed by the police's own forensics lab, and their findings were clear. The children had died, and their bodies had been incinerated in the bonfire. Experts studying the remains noted the arrangement of the bones in the ashes, which suggested how the bodies had been placed. While it was impossible to determine whether the children were alive when the fire was set, the physical evidence strongly pointed to cremation. For Ruth, the discovery brought unimaginable grief, but also a painful sense of closure. She was finally able to lay her children to rest with dignity. In September 2012, with mounting evidence and new expert testimony, a judge formally charged José Bretón with 2 counts of aggravated murder. The charges included the aggravating factor of kinship. As he awaited trial, José underwent psychiatric evaluations to determine whether he suffered from any serious mental illness. While he showed traits of narcissistic and antisocial personality disorders, he was deemed mentally competent and fully aware of his actions. Even as the case built against him, José never confessed. Authorities concluded that he had killed his children as a calculated act of revenge against Ruth. According to the reconstruction of events, October 8, 2011 was the day José carried out his plan. From September 29th to October 7th, he purchased sedatives after consulting a psychiatrist. Though he later denied acquiring the drugs, the investigation proved otherwise. These medications could have rendered the children unconscious or even caused their deaths before they were placed in the fire. In the final days leading up to the tragedy, José Bretón methodically set the pieces of his plan in place. In late September, he stockpiled firewood and purchased gasoline from a nearby station, preparing to carry out the act that would forever change the course of the investigation. He constructed a convincing alibi, informing his family that he would be spending the day at the park with his children. But in truth, his intentions were far more sinister. To strengthen the believability of his future story, José even ran a test. He briefly left his sister's children alone to observe how they reacted, an unsettling rehearsal for what was to come. On October 7th, he picked up his own children, spending the night with them at his parents' home. The next morning, he drove to his house with the children in the car. Before the journey, he had administered sedatives, medication previously obtained under the pretense of anxiety treatment, to keep them unconscious. Upon arrival, he attempted to call Ruth, but when she didn't answer, he continued with his plan undeterred. José prepared a large bonfire in a secluded area of the property. He placed the children's bodies beneath a metal table, doused the wood with gasoline, and ignited the fire. The intensity of the flames, fed by large quantities of fuel and dry wood, quickly reduced the remains to charred bone fragments. He tended to the fire for hours until around 5:30 p.m. Afterward, he drove a short distance and parked near the park. There, he called his brother and mother, pretending to be with the children and reinforcing his fabricated timeline. Once he felt his alibi was secure, he began manipulating those around him, making multiple calls to his family, urging them to join the search for the missing children. Eventually, he contacted emergency services, reporting their disappearance, and later appeared at the police station to file a formal report, fully aware that the story he told was a lie. The trial of José Bretón began on June 17, 2013. From the outset, his demeanor was unsettling. His rigid posture, unblinking gaze, and calm expression added an eerie tension to an already harrowing case. The trial opened with testimony from witnesses, including both José and Ruth. José maintained his innocence, denying all accusations. He claimed he adored his children and would have given his life for them. Trying to shift the blame, he argued that the real failure was on the part of investigators, accusing them of wasting time on him instead of searching for his children. "It's unbelievable," he declared, "that we still don't know where my kids are." Ruth, in contrast, painted a clear picture of their toxic relationship. She spoke about years of unhappiness and detailed episodes of emotional and physical abuse, both toward her and the children. Through tears, she recalled one moment when José slapped their son in front of others, prompting her to step in and tell him to never do it again. Forensic officers testified that the evidence had been preserved properly, and specialists confirmed what investigators had long feared. The remains found in the fire were human. One of the most devastating moments came when Ruth's cousin took the stand. He testified that José had privately confessed on 3 separate occasions to killing the children. According to him, José chillingly stated, "You'll never find them alive. They're dead." Despite José Bretón's persistent claims of innocence, the prosecution maintained throughout the trial that there was overwhelming evidence proving he had taken the lives of his children in an act of unspeakable cruelty driven by revenge against his ex-wife. On July 12, 2013, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury found the 40-year-old guilty of murdering both children. The verdict marked a pivotal moment in the case. José sat expressionless as the judgment was read. For the families of the victims, the decision brought a step toward justice, though the path to healing remained long and painful. On July 22, 2013, the court sentenced José to 20 years in prison for each murder, plus an additional penalty for filing a false police report. In March 2014, a cassation appeal was filed, claiming violations of José's right to the presumption of innocence. However, the Supreme Court upheld the 40-year sentence. A year later, in 2015, the Provincial Court of Córdoba reduced his sentence to 25 years. The case returned to headlines in October 2016 when José allegedly attempted suicide in prison. His lawyer, however, suggested he had likely been assaulted by another inmate. After several weeks in a hospital, he returned to prison, where he continued to receive visitors, including his mother, who remained convinced of his innocence. Attention then shifted to the question of prison benefits. According to Spanish law, José could request temporary release after serving a quarter of his sentence, approximately 7 years. But in 2019, those requests were denied. Authorities cited his lack of remorse, refusal to acknowledge his crimes, and his failure to apologize or attempt restitution. In 2021, reports emerged that during a restorative justice therapy session, José had finally admitted his guilt. The confession reportedly occurred in a group therapy setting where he revealed to fellow inmates, many of them also convicted murderers, that he was imprisoned for killing his children. The case resurfaced in the public eye once more in March 2025 when a Spanish newspaper published excerpts from a forthcoming book that included a series of confessions made by José. Through 60 letters and several interviews conducted while in prison since 2016, he at last admitted the truth. Though his sentence remains in effect, the confession could influence future decisions about his incarceration. Yet, due to the brutality of the crime and the lingering absence of genuine remorse, many believe that José's chances of obtaining benefits or sentence reductions should remain firmly out of reach. For the public, and especially for Ruth and her family, the case has once again stirred painful memories. A crime that had once seemed resolved has returned to the spotlight, reviving the anguish of a loss that will never fully heal. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.